Hello, Garland Nixon here with my friends, Dr. Jim Kavanagh and the one and only Steve Poikonen. We got all kinds of important news here for the end of the week to wrap up with. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon. Now, Dr. Jim Kavanagh, you can find all of his stuff on his Substack. He has his website is, let me make sure I'm in the middle, thepolemicist.net. And he's done a lot of good work on vaccines and COVID stuff and foreign policy, all kinds of stuff. So you can go to thepolemicist.net or his Dr. Jim Kavanagh, just look up his Substack is also great. Remember, there is no you in this Kavanagh. Also, Steve Poikonen and AM Wake Up, which you can find on Rockfin and on Rumble. He does a lot of good work here. What's interesting, guys, is three people, none of which are members of either the Democratic or the Republican Party, and all three of which have disdain and condescension and everything bad, all views of the mainstream parties. So we're going to have a blast. Let's get started. We got some articles of great consequence, and we're going to start with this one. And I think it's interesting. All right, let's go. State AG accuses Google of censorship. A Missouri Attorney General claims the tech giant has been waging war on the democratic process using its search services, right? Google is to be investigated for allegedly manipulating its search engine to undermine the democratic process. We didn't see any of that during COVID. But at any rate, so what we're looking at, guys, here is something that I'll put it like this. It don't take much to figure this out. I go on, and if I just search, again, I'm not for Kamala or Trump or whatever, but if I just search Kamala Harris, I get all of this positive stuff, Kamala, or I'll get positive stuff about Kamala, or I'll get something about Trump being Hitler. If I search Trump, I just get stuff about Trump being Hitler. It is so clear and obvious that Google is an agent of the machine, and for whatever reason, they don't seem to want Kamala more than, I don't know. But this is not just about politics. As I said, if we go back to COVID, your searches, anything that's of Israel, your searches, you look at them and it's like always so obvious that Google is an agent of the machine and that they're trying to manipulate us. And in talking to some of my friends that are brainwashed cult members, they're successful. Start with you, Jim Kavanagh.
You know, I'm sorry I didn't look it up. There's a guy, I forget his name now.
Epstein.
I was gonna say,
he's Epstein,
yeah. And he's done fabulous work, because what he's done is he hired people in research and set up their computers so that he was monitoring what search suggestions would come up as they were typing in the Google search thing. And that's something that nobody gets unless you have to have real-time monitoring. He had volunteers and I find that guy, and he showed how this changes elections, changes things, you know, what comes up when you start typing in Google and what doesn't come up. And really, yes, we've known all this for a year now, at least. You know, Taibbi and Schellenberger did it all with the Twitter files. This guy did the real thing. This guy Epstein, I forget his first name, but try and look at
Robert. Is it Robert?
It's Robert, Dr. Robert.
Yeah.
Robert, yeah. And that's the thing. When you watch that, you'll see how pernicious this is and how effective it is. And, you know, I don't know what this lawsuit, isn't this the Missouri versus Biden suit that was already kicked out by the Supreme Court? And you know, I don't know where this is going to go. Matt Orfalith, too, also has today a very good tweet thread and on his Substack about how Kamala started this with demanding that Trump be demoted from Twitter, and that really started a lot of very good Substack and Twitter thread by Matt Orfalith today. So this is a very pernicious and dangerous thing. They are now in an aggressive mode against the First Amendment. That we got to have a monitor who's going to tell us what the truth is, going to give permission tell us what misinformation is and what the truth is, and be the gatekeeper for what can and can't be said in social media online. This is really bad. It's not going to stop. I don't believe it's going to stop even with Trump. He's going to throw everybody out of the country who's a Marxist or a socialist or pro-Palestine. So this is something it's absolutely necessary to take seriously. And I think that Murphy versus Missouri versus Biden was already thrown out, but it's got to come back, and we have to fight this.
Well, actually, I've been reading a little bit. I think what they're doing is they're taking some of the information they got during that. They did the discovery, and they got communications between the government and the tech companies. And now they're taking the information that they got in that, and they're saying, well, okay, you threw that suit out, but we can file a different suit that's something different, which they certainly can based on that information. Steve, Poikonen.
So, I mean, there's a number of things to consider when we're talking about this. And we can also incorporate Tulsi Gabbard's lawsuit against Google back in 2020 for effectively the same thing, algorithmic manipulation, search result manipulation. There's a fantastic book from 2012 called When Google Met WikiLeaks.
Yep.
The Julian Assange wrote about a meeting that he had with Eric Schmidt, who now sits on a number of national security advisory boards and the AI advisory boards. Google is facing multiple monopoly lawsuits. So what I kind of see coming down the pike here is Google is broken up by the court system because they've had their run at the top of the browser wars, and they can then throw all of the human-led censorship kind of under the rug and go, well, we have 5 smaller companies now that aren't Google that are handling search results, and it's okay, they won't be manipulated because AI will now be what's running the search engines for you, so you know that it won't be humans. And, I mean, yeah, it's kind of funny, but is it that implausible?
Oh, no,
not
at all. Here's an article that I've recommended to a lot of people. Google is not what it seems, by Julian Assange, and this is an extract. From the book When Google Met WikiLeaks, and in that he talks about he talks about a guy who what was his name? Something Cohen. This guy, the bottom line was this: he worked for the U.S. State Department. And so what you see when you read this is that these people, they're at the U.S. State Department, then they're at a tech company, then they're back at the U.S. State Department, and you have this, and we saw that you had this incestuous relationship. There's another a couple other famous articles, guys may be familiar with it, where there was some protests going on. Twitter was planning on doing something for their platform, and they were going to upgrade some things, and they had told everybody between this hour and that hour, it's going to be a little tough to get on, could have some problems, but we're upgrading some things on our platform, right? And the State Department said, wait, there's some protests going on in Iran. They contacted Twitter and said, don't do that, because the protesters will be able to use it. What they really meant was the U.S. Embassy is going to be able to, manipulate the protests with that. And Twitter said, okay. So what we see, I'll put it like this. It's not plausible that they're using Twitter and Facebook and the social media to manipulate for their regime change overseas, and they're not using it for the regime change right here. Jim.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, they did it. We know they did it. They banned Donald Trump, the president of the United States, from Twitter and from social media because he was promoting violence, although he said explicitly, don't be violent, be peaceful. We know they've done this. We know they banned the White House was the first thing. Literally the first few days in the White House, the Biden White House, they were demanding that they kick Kennedy off of Twitter, etc. Facebook has just hired a woman from the IDF. They understand that these are important channels of information, and they're not going to let them go, and they're going to use them to construct the narrative, maintain the narrative, manage the narrative. This is extremely important for them. This is what's, I forget, it was a guy who said this is not about Israel and the Zionist narrative, and if we're losing this on social media, this is not a sideshow. This is the show. We have to control the narrative. We're losing it. And they're losing it because they're lying, and they can find out people online and independent people who are telling them the truth, and people start believing them. And that's the problem. It's the fomenting discord and distrust in the establishment narrative. That's my job. I mean, that's the job of anyone who is an independent thinker. It's a question of putting out what you think is the truth. And if they're afraid of it, then they should debate it. But they don't do that. What they want to do is cancel you and kick you off. And this is being managed by governmental organizations, by the White House, by the 3,200, the Israelis, etc. And this is what we're facing, and it's going to get worse.
Well, and here's the other thing. There are a lot of things going on that we don't even know about, and that most people don't know about, because I forgot one of these websites. I don't remember. Was it Black Agenda Report or something? One of these websites that I'd signed, when you go there, would you want to sign up to receive the notifications or whatever? And I said, yeah, right. Doing my radio show, all of these were ones that I checked daily for a new story, or, I would have somebody from the website, Covert Action Magazine with Jeremy Kuzmarov, whatever. All of these websites, I had it set up so when they put their new stuff out, it would send it to me, right? And at one point, I heard Epstein talking about this, and I started noticing they would literally send the updates for these websites to my spam folder, right? So I signed up to a couple of like mainstream stuff, salon.com and Mother Jones, the stuff that's total neoliberal. Those website notifications would come right to my primary email. And the other stuff would go to my spam folder, and I'd have to dig it out, or promotions or something, and you'd have to dig it out. And then, and I was like, what the hell? And then I heard Epstein on Jimmy Dore, and he was saying they were literally doing that with candidates. The candidate, literally in a particular area where a candidate was running, the candidate that they wanted, that person would go, that person's emails would go to all of the people's primary emails, and the other ones would go to promotions. Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that Google has done pretty regularly, not necessarily even just with candidates, but as you were talking about specific news outlets. There's a woman coming on AM Wake Up on Tuesday named Carrie Wedler, who used to run Anti-Media. And Anti-Media was deplatformed on Facebook in the 2016 election. And it was part of a very early purge of news aggregate websites and news websites that got caught up in the first round of censor-happy goonery. That I don't, that we're on YouTube. I probably can't say what I want to say.
No, you're good.
This is an ongoing and very pervasive problem, and I don't think breaking up the monopoly that is Google is going to solve it. If you go to DuckDuckGo, it uses Google on the back end.
Yep.
The Brave browser seems to be pretty good. There's a couple other browsers that are okay, but if you go to like Yandex or something, your computer's automatically flagged. Russia's search engine. Not only that, but there are some pretty bad actors that like to throw a couple of legit looking websites onto Yandex that are, have various forms of viruses or spyware on them. So it's one of those things that really requires constant vigilance and then dedication to, you have to have basically a degree in research in order to navigate this stuff better. And it's all designed to keep the average Joe from never getting anywhere near the truth.
Go ahead, Jim.
One of the things that's going to complicate it, and they're going to use, is the fact that, with the deep fakes and everything, it is going to become more and more difficult to know what's true, what's a real representation, and what's a fake representation. And that's the kind of thing that they can use. I mean, trolls will put that out for the fun of it, but the deep state can throw out millions of those things, which will just make it discourage people from going to independent media and using the social media. So that's one way they can screw things up for us, by using the new apparatus of fakery, really, to make independent media more complicated to use, as you said, Steve.
Well, here's the thing, and we'll use it as a verb. They can new knowledge you. Here's what I mean. If you remember this company, New Knowledge, what did they do? Now, for those who don't know, one place you may remember New Knowledge from is the Senate hired them to write their report on Russian interference in the election. The Center hired them after they got banned from a whole bunch of places because the guy, Roy, what's his name, the judge down in Alabama that was running for office. New Knowledge was
Moore, I think.
Yeah, the New Knowledge was hired by the Democrats to look into what was going on there, and New Knowledge came up with the idea that, hey, look, this guy, all of these Russians are supporting this guy, Russian trolls. But what actually happened was New Knowledge created a bunch of fake Russian accounts. They turned them all for supporting Roy Moore, and then they said, hey, the Russians are supporting Roy Moore, but they were damn Russians. So what I'm saying is this. The other day, some stupid looking, clearly AI guy came out, AI video came out, and it was some guy saying that he was a male that was sexually molested by Tim Walz. And when you looked at the mouth moving, it was so obviously AI. And of course, all the liberals went crazy. You see, there it is, the deep fake. And I thought to myself, those bastards put that out. I think the big thing about it is they will new knowledge us from a verb perspective, and they will put out these easily, deep fakes that are easy to spot. And then they can say, well, look at these deep fakes out there. We've got to do something about them. And I think we get that a lot, Steve.
Well, we do. And we're going to see them flood the zone with a lot of this stuff, especially as we get even closer to Selection Day. I feel like there's going to be I feel like there's going to be a couple of, major quote unquote bombshell. They're already talking about how there's supposed to be a report coming out about Kamala Harris being an attendee at the Diddy parties down in Calabasas and stuff like that, which in all likelihood is true. She definitely tried to move in some of those circles. Certainly, Mayor Willie Brown did. And there's a very long history of her protecting very, very well-heeled, very well-connected people. She gave the Catholic Church a pass. She gave refused
Mnuchin.
She gave Steve Mnuchin a pass, but she also took his money. She gave a pass to reopening the murder of RFK Sr. There's all kinds of things that you could point to, but before we get that actual report, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if there's a leaked audio that is 100% contrived. It wouldn't surprise me if the same thing happens to Trump or JD Vance or something like that too. And it's just going to be their weapons of mass confusion. That's all the best you could say about it right now.
It's like the old saying, a person who sells umbrellas needs a lot of rain, and the person who wants to say we've got to censor more because of deep fakes. Well, they create a whole bunch of deep fakes, stick them out there. Oh, look at this. There are deep fakes everywhere. All right, let's move on. We got another interesting article that I think kind of aligns with this one. Media falls below Congress in trust survey. Oh, what a shock, right? And that's tough. Okay. This the just released results from the Gallup Trust in Media Survey leave no doubt that members of my profession are officially America's lowest life form, Gallup asked. This is Matt Taibbi. In general, how much trust and confidence do you have in the mass media, such as newspapers, TVs, and radio, when it comes to reporting blah, blah, blah? A great deal, fair amount. A great deal. This is in America. 8%. Fair amount, 23%. Not very much, 33%. And none at all, 36%, right? So 69% are not very much or not at all, and a fair amount, 23. Here's the sad thing. I have friends that are diehard Democrats, and you listen to them, and they're like, oh, Rachel Maddow tells us the truth, even though there was a lawsuit, and in her own lawyers in the lawsuit said, yeah, she doesn't do news. She does exaggeration. Literally, they said she does exaggeration to prove political points, right? But they truly, in their heart, believe that she tells them the truth. It's interesting that the people that believe what they read on and hear on the news, and are the most certain, are the most uninformed. But we see now people are going to alternative media, which is why they're doing everything they can to shut down alternative media, including Radio Sputnik. Anyway, had to throw that one in there, personal. But at any rate, your thoughts on this Trust in Media survey, Jim Kavanagh?
Well, I thought the best line in that was from Matt Taibbi was, there are necrophiliacs who wouldn't touch a politician's corpse. and now it's even worse for the media. And this is the point. Look, they lied about everything. And you go back to WMDs and the Iraq War. But in the past 6 years, the whole Russiagate hoax, which was a hoax, and what happened during COVID was just a pack of lies that pushed people into hating each other. And into, Taibbi does a good job at showing, Jimmy Kimmel saying we got to keep the people who are unvaccinated out of hospitals and let them die. And all of this was hatred that was ginned up out of a pack of lies. Russiagate, COVID. And I think going through all that, people are just fed up and they don't believe a word that's being said, because the media in that circumstance, in all of those circumstances, acted as the stenographers for the official line. And that's all they did. And it was a pack of lies. So it's like everything else. This is why are people voting for Trump? Because they're just sick and they don't believe anything. They don't believe Kamala Harris. They don't believe the media. And they're right. They shouldn't. You should approach this with the presumption that they're trying to fool you in some way or another, because usually they are. And I don't know how to rectify this at this point. The only way, people have to go to independent media and make, serious judgments and do their own research and do their own thinking. And that's this. There's no magic way around that. There's no magic button that's going to show you the truth. You have to go out and look for it and think and have a critical perspective and come to your own conclusions.
Steve.
Well, the magic button that takes you directly to the truth is the link that you click to watch AM Wake Up Monday through Thursday. No, but do you see the other side of the operation here, though? Because as trust in traditional media outlets has been imploding, collapsing on its own footprint, much like Building 7, there's been the rise of the mainstream alternative media. And the mainstream alternative media is going to be the answer to, lost trust in traditional media. So it's still being built up to keep people away from all of us. And it's still being structured in a way where now major figures from the corporate media, Tucker Carlson, Chris Cuomo.
You mean Crystal? You mean Crystal and Sagar aren't giving us the unfiltered truth?
Oh my God, those guys are terrible, just terrible. And it's just this emotionally driven, talking point based nonsense that all it's designed to do is funnel you right back into the duopoly. That's the whole aim for it. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Jim, Crystal and Sagar are a perfect example of what he's talking about. And I think that's what we got to be wary of, because these people are smart and they understand, okay, they're falling, they're not falling for the old banana in the tailpipe trick, as they used to say, right? But they send us someone out there who kind of has the veneer of alternative media, and they'll say some things, right, until Brianna Joy Gray criticizes Israel, and they ain't allowed to be on and they ain't allowed to be there anymore. Anyway, your thoughts on all of that, Jim?
Well, it is, we have to be selective and look. Crystal Ball has been pretty damn good on Israel and Gaza and Palestine, and much better than anything else you see in the mainstream media. So, I give people the benefit of the doubt in the sense that, we have to look. RFK Jr. is great on vaccines and health and children's health. He's terrible on Israel, and it's really important. So there are consequential things that some people are good on X consequential thing, and they're bad on Y consequential thing. And that's going to happen. It's going to proliferate. And as I'm saying, yes, Steve, you're absolutely right. Now that your button is my button on the Substack and Garland Nixon's button, there are people who are just right all the time. but there are people who are right half the time or a quarter of the time or a tenth of the time. And that's going to proliferate. And there's no way avoiding the confusion that's out there and the proliferation of different voices. You got to recognize, that the Hill and Rising, etc., they have a corporate backer. They have a corporate angel or a billionaire backer, and keep that in mind and read and watch with discrimination and critical thinking.
Yeah, and before I go to this next screen, I just want to remind everybody that, as we know, the jab is safe and effective. In fact, Steve and Jim and I just had ours. We're completely covered. We wear masks and condoms during the all of any shows. Yeah, literally over our shows, so we can't breathe. So if you haven't had your vax today, if you haven't had your latest booster, make sure you get one during this show or immediately after, as the three of us all will, because we all know that 75 years from now, when we get the information from Pfizer, we will surely find out that they were safe and effective. So let's not forget that. All right, now, because I'm sure we gotta tell you that to keep eBay. Oh, wait a minute, that's not the one I was looking for. 1 second, I'm almost there, guys. All right, here we go. Perfect example of ensuring that our dear friends in the media are keeping everybody wise and knowledgeable. So there was a survey. Now listen to this during COVID. Make sure I got the right one. Yes. Okay. And it was the survey of 1,016 U.S. likely voters was conducted on January 5th, 2022 by the Heartland Institute and Rasmussen. The survey, okay, blah, blah, blah. Field work. Okay, here we go. 75% of likely Democrats, but only 21% of Republicans, 38% of unaffiliated voters had a favorable opinion of Dr. Fauci. 58% of voters would oppose a proposal to fine Americans who don't get the vaccine. 55% of Democratic voters would support such a proposal, compared to just 19% of Republicans. 59% of Democratic voters would favor a government policy requiring that citizens remain confined to their homes at all times, except for emergencies, if they don't get the jab. Such a proposal is opposed by 61% of all likely voters, including 79% of Republicans. Nearly half of Democratic voters think federal and state governments should be able to fine or imprison individuals who publicly question the efficacy of the vaccine on social media, television, radio, or blah, blah, blah. Only 27% of all voters, 14% of Republicans. 45% of Democrats would favor governments requiring citizens to temporarily live in designated facilities or locations if they refuse, such as Abu Ghraib as an example. If they refuse to get a COVID-19 vaccine, of course, everybody with a brain would oppose it. While 2/3 of likely voters would be against government using digital devices to track unvaccinated people to ensure they are quarantined, 47% of Democrats favor a government tracking program for those prices. I'm not going to lead or badger the witness. Let's start with you. Your thoughts on that damn survey, Steve Poikonen?
It amazes me how science, or the science, has been weaponized to become a partisan cudgel. You know what I mean? Over the last, basically this century, we've seen the replacement of, in a predominantly secular society, the traditional church with the church of the science and the church of, the political ideology. And that's what you have to do in order to figure out who you are as a human being, how you have to self-identify. And it's down to the point to where someone who is, by all accounts, for the last 40 plus years, a proven criminal in Dr. Fauci. Like the whole AZT thing, and the amount of people who unnecessarily met their end because of that and because of his specific pushing of it. Like, he never should have been in a spot to tell people, if you go outside, you need to wear a mask, and then you should probably put 3 more masks on over that mask. That never should have happened in the first place. And yet you still have more than half of Democrats that are like, oh yeah, almost 3/4 of Democrats that are like, oh yeah, that guy's great. They were making saint candles with Fauci's image on it.
Yes.
Which is insane to me. But
they did the same thing. What was the guy that was investigating Trump for Russiagate?
Oh, Mueller.
They did the same thing. They had they were singing carols, Mueller carols on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, this is how broken people's brains are, how effective propaganda is, especially weaponized propaganda, and just how far the country has to go yet before we're ever going to have a rational conversation with each other about this kind of subject. You know, I mean, it's still very, very flashpoint issues in the minds of a lot of people, and they're remasking all over the place right now. We did a story a week or two ago about how the mask mandates are coming back in the Bay Area based on nothing, based on, oh, it might be cold soon, so you should probably do that. I'm not even kidding. That was their logic behind it. So people's brains have been so fractured and broken that it's going to take an awful lot of, I don't know, patience and an awful lot of finding new ways to communicate old information to people just so they can get their heads around basic core concepts.
And I want to remind everybody in the chat that hopefully, if you are in the chat, I hope that you are vaxxed and boosted because they're safe and effective. and might I add, make sure you have your mask on. We will be throwing people out of the chat if they are unmasked because we want everybody in the chat to be safe. We're all super duper pro YouTube. And if you get a mask that says YouTube on it, yeah, now then you're really rolling. You're really going to be extra safe. Jim, look, the majority of Democrats during that a particular survey felt literally that the unvaccinated should be put in indoctrination camps. Might I remind you that Trump is a fascist who admires Hitler?
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, again, regarding Fauci, as a fellow alumnus of the high school that Fauci went to, you know, I was on a email chain with my classmates, and if you think the general population treated Fauci as a saint, you haven't seen anything. I mean, it was so bad that, you know, and these are people, it's a scholarship school. It's, you know, people are lawyers and professors and professionals. And I had one doctor, because I wrote the long article, and everybody should read, called Danger to Society, against vaccine mandates. And I had one of my classmates, a doctor in a Catholic hospital, say, I hope to see Jim Kavanagh die in agony from COVID. So that's the kind of thing I was getting from Fauci stands. And as Steve says, you know, science developed out of religion. You know, the religious outlook included science. That was the mode of knowledge for thousands of years. And science developed precisely as something which rejected sacred texts or rejected clerical authority, and the argument against authority is a staple of science, that truth doesn't come from authority, it comes from investigation and questioning, and it's always better to have the right questions than the wrong answers. And what we had throughout this, and this is what's been really destroyed over COVID, in the process of investigating and asking questions has been denigrated in favor of the process of accepting the answers that the authorities have given you. That is anti-scientific. It's an epistemological crisis that we're in, and they're not giving up on it. And it's one of the most profoundly disturbing things, and what really does undermine Western civilization and all civilization, when you adopt that attitude that the way to understand the truth and the way to get to knowledge is to depend on the experts, depend on the authorities, rather than to ask the questions and do the research. So there's nothing worse than that's happened as a result of that.
You know,
as far as the fascist thing is interesting, I'm very worried now that they're embracing, you know, as with the Israelis, every accusation is a confession.
Right.
And the Democrats' accusations about Trump being a fascist, I mean, look at their attempt to quash the First Amendment, to quash independent thinking and critical thinking. And now that they've embraced this term fascist for Trump, I am really worried about, they're the ones who are going to say, we can't allow him to be president if he wants it. We can't allow it. And so this is we have to see that as a confession and as a premonition of what the Democrats are going to do.
Steve, also, um, I remember when they raided Scott Ritter's house, and I read an article and what they were and what they and in the New York Times, and it said that Scott Ritter was like amplifying like rhetoric or themes or something that could be viewed as favorable to the Russian. And I'm like, boy, you're reaching, aren't you? You know what I mean? He's amplifying rhetoric, or that could be viewed by whom, first of all, as favorable to the government of Vladimir Putin. To me, that's the same thing as we're talking about when we talk about if they say this is the science and you say, well, I have some questions about that. How dare you? Into the re-education camp for you, Mr. Thinking Too Much guy, right? But it's all the same thing, because when they're like, it was an unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, and you're like, well, there's a historical context here. Let's go back to 2014 and this and that. And you start, like, again, going into the data that you have that points to at least the validity of an alternative perspective. It's the same thing. How dare you do that? And as we're just saying, they want to throw Scott Ritter in jail. Danny Shaw, he stops at the airport. Oh, really? Same with Kavanagh. Oh, you're stopping at the airport, are you? Richard Medhurst. These guys go to the airport. They get grabbed, some arrested, some just harassed for a few hours, whatever the case may be. But it's the same thing. Once there is a dogmatic position by the ruling elite, they now say they can call it the science. They can use words like propaganda, but it's like, you're not allowed to oppose the dogma of the ruling elite. I think that's the same thing all over. Steve.
Well, that's part of the reason why they've gone to such great lengths to eliminate informed consent from major medical decisions. It's part of the reason why in the medical profession, there's maybe 20 minutes, if you're lucky, in your entire medical schooling career on nutrition. Yeah, it's why when medical school students get taught about vaccinations, they're just taught the schedule. And that's the only thing that they're taught about them. So when you so compartmentalize the information on the front end, by the time it gets to now we need to disseminate some things to the general public, you've got entire armies full of effectively information automatons that can only repeat what they've been programmed to repeat. And so if there's no informed consent, if there's a war on critical thinking, if there's a censorship apparatus that permeates basically every avenue of information sharing, you're going to have a very, very limited scope, or very, very limited stream that is only the only thing allowed out. And anyone who sticks their hand up and goes, are you sure about that? Is going to be treated like a heretic, not like a lunatic, but a heretic, because you're committing a heresy against the, wise and powerful mother church, the science, or the government, or whatever you want to stick in there, that has almost a complete capture on all of the information around it, including the other side of the PSYOP coin, which is, Rand Paul pretending to grill Fauci, which is Senate hearing after Senate hearing that results in absolutely nothing except for the elevation of a couple of different, anti-doctors or whatever it is, who are selling, their own supplements and their own products and $289 emergency kits that have, $26 worth of medicine in it.
Well, Jim. And I think I had another thing, but I forgot what it was. It was important. But at any rate, Jim, did you have another comment?
Well, no, yeah, this is why, it's terrible to see. And what makes it hard? I mean, RFK Jr. is really good on this stuff. He's been very good on this for a long time, and he was courageous about it. He really, his family had disowned him about it years ago, 10 years ago. And, I communicated with him when I wrote my article, because I have a good friend who's a friend of his, actually. And he was praising my article, but then you see him turn around and he do something, which is just terrible. And what he's done to the third party movement in the country is terrible. Very good thing by Michael Tracy on that now, about how he didn't just change his mind. That's just not just a thing that we leftists might not like or whatever. But he went to small independent parties in the states, the Reform Party in Florida, et cetera, et cetera. He made deals with them that hurt. Then he just walked away from that, and it hurt those parties. So he's hurt the third party movement in the United States by what he's done, by just going to Republicans. That's what he did. He's not running a third party. He's not an anti-duopoly campaign. He is part of the Republican presidential campaign. So, this is the problem. I see, people who, and I don't have what to do about it, except, pick and choose. There are people who are very good on certain things and people who are very bad on other things. And some of those things all of those things, most of them are very important. Of course, I would say, I don't think there's anything more important than genocide. And watching children being slaughtered every day. This is goddamn disgraceful. And I'm ashamed to be a human being at this point. But, we have the question of the abortion rights, which is important, a question of health and vaccine rights and medical rights, which are important. And we don't have anything out there that unites all those things except us. I mean, you have the very few people out there who actually see these things together. And it's a shame, and it's making it very difficult for all of us.
Here's another interesting, a guy who I really looked at a lot of his, what was going on with him during the, the truckers stuff, right? Or or as they called them, the Nazis, the Nazi truckers. Okay, Canada's Trudeau given a deadline. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is facing opposition from his own party. State broadcaster CBC News reported on Thursday over 20 MPs from the Trudeau-led Liberal Party have penned a letter asking him to step down and face consequence. They've given him until October 28th. What's best for our party is a change of leadership. He says that the party is strong and united. The Canadian leader has repeatedly said he plans to lead the party until election. Okay, here's my take on it, part of it. Look at what happened in England. Okay, they got the Tories and people are sick of it because they're getting screwed. And now they got Keir Starmer and they got the Tories again. I mean, there's only one party there, right? And I think there's people in the party realizing that this guy who has about as much testosterone as Tim Walz in his body, right? This guy is a bad look, and that there's no amount of blackface that they can put on this guy to make him appealing anymore. And so what they want to do is get another face for the same, so they can all do standing ovations for retired Nazis. And but he won't be there looking bad. That's all that is. It's not that the neoliberals ever want to change their policies, but every now and then they want to go from Obama to Macron to Trudeau, from Truss to Bojo to Sunak to Starmer. It's always the same guy or girl or whatever the case may be. Jim.
Well, yeah, these parties are counter-revolutionary, capitalist and Zionist parties, and they're institutionally committed to that. And that's not going to, you're not going to vote your way out of that. I mean, there was more of a slight chance in that during the kind of high social democratic period in Europe, but that's kind of gone because the assault on social democracy in Europe followed the demise of the Soviet Union when they didn't need it anymore. So now these are dedicated, institutionally committed to neoliberal capitalism and Zionism, and that is a fight we haven't even started. Well, we've started, but just barely started to engage in, let alone having any chance of winning.
Steve, you're one of your favorite guys. You know what was interesting about that? And it was when I watched that whole trucker thing, right? And like they told me that the truckers were Nazis. They were a bunch of white supremacists, blah, blah, blah. So I'm watching, it's like Saturday or whatever. And I got like every TV in my house when I go from room to room. They're all on YouTube, every TV in the bedroom, wherever. I got this stuff on, right? And I'm watching this. I found it very interesting. I saw like all these Sikhs. I'm seeing women. I'm seeing all of these diverse groups and a bunch of white guys. Sure, it's Canada. What else the hell? And they're like, yeah, this is screwed up. And then most of them were like, yeah, I'm vaccinated, but I really don't think it's fair to people who aren't.
Yeah.
So there were people who 80% of them were vaccinated. They were extremely diverse. And somehow a Nazi flag showed up. Gee, I can't imagine that the intelligence agencies would have planned that. But a Nazi flag shows up. And now all of a sudden the Sikhs and the women and the black people and the people of all diverse cultures are suddenly just a bunch of white Nazi guys. And then Trudeau's, here's the thing I recall the best. There was a woman who donated $25 when it first started. She was a single mother, didn't have much money at all. She donated $25 and they locked her bank accounts up. for that. And she couldn't like get any money for her and her kids or whatever. And she's like, but you hadn't even made it illegal when it was ex post facto. They hadn't even made it illegal when she donated the money. And then eventually they found out that it was all illegal. But it's always months and months later, and nobody pays the price, and nobody compensates the people that get screwed. Steve.
Yeah, that's the whole game, and it's always the very, very necessary upfront for erasure to take place, so that all of the varied groups and all of the different kinds of people that you mentioned that were attending these protests and these rallies get completely taken out of the equation. And it's just, you find, like the biggest, meanest looking white guy that you can, or you find that one clip that you can take out of context, or that one statement that you can take out of context, and you make it the face of it. And then you march, a smarmy, puffed up douche like Trudeau out there to condemn all of them. But that's part of the reason now why he's lost so much favor, is because, most Canadians do remember that. And there's a ton of them who, after now 4 years of incontrovertible evidence to whether or not safe and effective was merely a marketing term, are going, hey, wait a minute. These guys really did try to shut down the country. They yanked and froze bank accounts from people. They, locked people up over it. They threatened to lock up all kinds of people over it. They have no accountability. They have nobody that, according to the marketing, they're supposed to be answerable to the people. But I guess Canada's a still basically a crown territory. They still have the queen on their money, as far as I know, or I guess maybe they have King Chuck bills now, but they're effectively a satrap. And so if you're going to try and have any sort of leadership in that situation, it's only going to be a royal functionary. So I'm not sure how the Canadians are going to deal with that. I'm not sure what they think they can do. And most of them, they already gave, most of them already gave up their guns. Most of them really did, take the shots. And so there's a timeline for how many people are even going to be around to defend themselves. As far as that goes, they're going to have to lean on the Native American population there, the indigenous population there, that's been subjected to a couple of centuries of Canadian government brutality. Not really sure how that's going to work out. But yeah, as the Chinese say, we definitely live in interesting times.
Yeah. And one of the things that that's something that one of the things that opened my eyes, the whole truckers thing. I'll still remember I'm watching these people outside. They're playing music. You remember that? You had people from the town coming out bringing water and bringing food to the people. They were dancing. Their music, people are literally dancing festively in the streets. And they were telling us that they were brutal neo-Nazis who were coming to slaughter us all, right? And now, like 2 years later, in the corner bottom last page of these newspapers, you see that the lawsuits that they filed against the government were found on their behalf, and that all these things they did was illegal, and blah, blah, blah. Nobody's compensated. And at that point, I'm like, I think that Nazi flag, if you looked at it, it probably would say made in Langley, Virginia. Anyway, Jim.
Well, yeah, but the point that you're saying is, so as Trudeau's played himself out now, Biden has played himself out. They put these people out. Obama has played himself out.
Good point. Yeah.
Kamala played herself out in a couple of months, so, and they want to retain the idea that we're going to put somebody else up who really will change things, Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump or whatever. These parties are committed to certain things. They have fights on certain issues that there really are fights about. There are fights about abortion rights. There are fights on the edges about whether, you can have to be mandated to take a vaccine or not. But fundamental issues of wealth extraction from the economy, of imperialism and of Zionism, they are united, and they're institutionally set up. And the media and political apparatuses of the country are institutionally set up to present to you only choices that are within that window, that Overton window. And that's the situation we're in. And it's terrible. So, Trudeau can be thrown out the wayside. Kamala can be thrown out. Barack Obama can be thrown out. But they're desperate. Who else are they going to find? And I don't know. And where can people go? I don't know. The third party option is not really an option in this country. You have to change a lot of things before before you have the ability to even construct a choice.
You know what's interesting about this Obama thing, because he's part of that whole Trudeau thing. You know what I mean? Obama, Trudeau, Macron, all of these people that like look good looking, they got good hair, you know what I mean? And they got the cool hair and all of this stuff. And when you look below the surface, either they're stupid or they're smart, but they're just puppets for power. You know what I mean? And they're put out there like avatars for power, right? Kamala, Steve, in the same way that the Trudeau experiment's running out of gas, they march Obama out because a lot of black guys are like, dude, we're trying to eat. And 4 years of this ain't worked real well. We got to go. It's like when you go, and I've heard this said, when you go to the grocery store, there's not one aisle for black guys and one aisle for white guys. Everybody's paying 5 times what they paid for a head of lettuce before. And, and it's not like 7% inflation if the lettuce was 99% and now it's $3.99, right? And they can figure this out. So Obama, we've got it covered. We got the black guys covered. They're not for Kamala, but we know what to do. Out they march Obama, finger wagging. You bunch of misogynist, sexist, shut up and come around. And it didn't go over well at all. He's Trudeau. They played that hand one time too many. And when it comes down to it, as they say on the street, people are just trying to eat, man. And they're like, oh, are you kidding me? I'd vote for anything if they would bring down the price of eggs. Steve.
No, you're absolutely right. And so I would expect to see a lot more squeezing of the peasantry, because they haven't fallen in line like that yet. Kamala Harris stood there at like a town hall or something like that, told people, I understand your concern with the cost of groceries, but we have a genocide that we need to arm and fund.
Yeah.
And so
she said exactly that.
she died. Yeah, it's almost a direct quote.
Yeah.
The thing with Obama was so poorly done and so poorly handled. And if you look at Obama's body language, he's got his hands in his pockets, he's kind of slouching, like it's almost like he doesn't even believe the BS that he's spewing. They have to come up with something new, and I think what the new thing is again, AI driven governance. I think that there's going to be a huge push regardless of which puppet they install, although I do think it's going to be Trump for a number of different reasons. Building the infrastructure out for the digital prisons certainly being the top one of them. That's why you've got Elon Musk effectively bankrolling Trump's campaign along with Miriam Adelson. And then you've got Peter Thiel.
He's an important cog in this wheel.
There's no JD Vance without Peter Thiel. JD Vance is Peter Thiel's golf club, and he has no career without him. Plucked from relative obscurity to go, do startups for Thiel Capital, and a Thiel Capital Scholarship awardee with no reason other than he could maybe eventually become politically prominent. So that's how it's going to be done, and it's going to usher us into the era of various different corporatocracies that pass as governments. And if you make government itself such a failure, people are going to eventually demand that somebody more competent step in. Who better than your corporate overlords, who probably will lower the price of eggs, but it'll come at the cost of 100% of what remains of any of your rights or civil liberties. And if your social credit score isn't up to par, well, then you don't have access to eggs that day.
Well, the good news is eggs are only 15 cents a dozen. The bad news is you only get 15 minutes to drive to the store and get the eggs. Jim, they're rolling out Obama. He's some version of Trudeau, but it don't seem to be working for some reason, Jim.
Well, this is, again, people don't understand that people are voting Democrat and vote for Kamala. They just don't understand that people are really pissed off. They're not, that they've run this game with the nice looking and the sweet talking guys, and that's just not working anymore. They see Obama could have changed. Obama came in with a huge mandate, could have changed things. Instead, he brought Rubin in from Citibank and tell him whom to appoint to his cabinet, saved the banks, and threw people out of their homes. Black people, the position of black people got worse in the economy during Obama. So this is, people are tired of this. They don't believe any of this crap anymore. Now they're fooled by Trump, who comes across as, I'm telling you like it is, and he is in some respects telling it like it. He's presenting himself in his authentic assholic way.
The fry cook. I call him the fry cook now.
People don't care about the fact that he's an asshole, and they see that he's not pretending to be anything else. They see people like Obama and Kamala, and they see they're pretending to be something they're not. And that's why he's got some appeal. And the working class is saying, there's a thing in the New York Times today, oh, I went around the country talking to working class people to see why they're voting for Trump. And white, black, women, Latino, every working class person I spoke to says they're going to vote for Trump. And it's all because they all said, I don't believe anything Trump says, but I had more money. I think they're going to be better off under Trump. And that's because fundamentally you've got this underlying capitalist ideology, this Shark Tank ideology that working class thinks they're temporarily embarrassed millionaires. And you have a history of billionaire populism, which is stupid. But that's where they go. We are in this wheel, this merry-go-round, and this seesaw where you go from nice guy, liberal, Kamala saying, I'm going to fight for the little guy. I'm going to fight for the middle class. And I grew up middle class, to billionaires who come in and say, I know how to run the country because I'm a good businessman. And that's what we're in. And it's very difficult to get out of. And we haven't really started yet. It's extremely difficult to go out of, because even a lot of the progressives tend to accept some of the assumptions of those things. So I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to have whoever gets elected is going to be a disaster for the country.
Yeah, because it isn't about that. Kamala Harris means nuclear war. RFK Jr. Supporters of Kamala Harris in the U.S. presidential election would effectively voting for a global thermonuclear war, RFK Jr. argued in his latest campaign video. Okay, let me say this. While I could say, yeah, there's some merit to that. However, that ignores one thing. That pretends like Israel wouldn't be the first person to throw nukes at the drop of a hat. Yes, I agree with him on the Ukraine conflict, and they're talking about mitigating the Ukraine conflict, which their plans won't work. But okay, but at least they're thinking about that. That's a good thing. But some of the same clowns are still talking about doing something, protecting Taiwan. If you think that China is going to let that happen, and that's a sure nuclear conflict. And of course, we won't get to that because Israel will throw nukes at the drop of a hat. So yes, he's true, but it ignores, RFK Jr. ignores the danger of the Israeli conflict. Steve.
Well, yeah, and he's it's probably one of the only reasons that he hasn't met similar fates as some of his other relatives.
Right.
Because you dig around in the JFK assassination long enough, all roads lead to Mossad. You dig around in RFK Sr.'s assassination long enough, you come to the only conclusion you can come to is that Sirhan was not the person who did the thing that he was accused of doing. And there was significant reason to believe that the plane crash that took out JFK Jr. Had a lot of encouragement from some of the Clintons' very, very good friends, because he was the presumed senator from New York. His plane goes down. Next thing you know, the Clintons have a house in Chappaquiddick? Yeah. And now all of a sudden Hillary Clinton is that senator. Without sounding too conspiratorial, there's a lot of math that doesn't math on the official narrative for all of the Kennedy deaths. And RFK Jr.'s inextricable relationship with some of the most disgusting Zionists that the United States has had to offer speaks to a kind of insurance policy that allows for him to go out and do the children's health defense stuff. Because I think a lot of people, at least 10 years ago, when RFK Jr. was starting to talk about these things, thought, oh, well, it's such a fringe kook minority that this is never going to take hold. And we can make, we can make this guy the face of it. And if he ever gets into a position of prominence, we'll just start letting all of the skeletons out of the closet, which again is, very, very much a hallmark of Mossad and a number of the espionage / blackmail operations that they've ran. So RFK Jr. Was compromised from day one. The thing that bothers me most, though, is that he seems like he actually believes this stuff. Like he's just never going to be as curious as he's been on so many other things. He's just going to, boldly refuse to look at any other side of the issue, because the side that he's on is the right side. He's fighting for justice. These are beleaguered, persecuted people surrounded on all sides by enemies, and that's his rhetoric. It's just mind-boggling unless you factor in it's probably the only thing keeping him alive.
Jim, this madness and crazy conspiracy theories about the Clintons being involved in rubbing people out. I don't know what kind of madness, what manner of insanity is this? But anyway, your thoughts on RFK Jr.'s discussion of Kamala Harris and nuclear war.
Well, yeah, I think, it is incredible. I think he really does believe what he's saying about this. And, as I pointed out, exactly what he did with vaccines, which was to buck what was the received wisdom that everybody accepted. I accepted it for most of my life. Oh, vaccines are wonderful. Everything's great. You can't question the vaccine. And going against that and having the courage to go against that and being disowned by his family for it and the Democratic Party for it. But then when it came to something which is just like that, which was Zionism, the received wisdom, oh, it's the greatest thing in the world that there's a Jewish state in the Middle East, and it's wonderful that this happened at the cost of 750,000 Palestinians. And we don't even think about that, just something that's great. And as a liberal, intelligent person, this makes me virtuous to support. He still believes that, and he won't go against it. I don't know why it is. Is it being blackmailed? I don't know. But this is the case, as you say. He can get up and talk about Ukraine, but again, his position and Trump's position on Ukraine, they haven't said anything really about Ukraine that's going to solve the problem. They haven't.
Before you go, let me throw one thing in. One thing I got to throw in. There is a faction of the ruling elite, a couple of different factions for different reasons, that want out of Ukraine. Yeah. So you can say that because there are some of the ruling elite that will go along with you. So as long as there's some people in that ruling elite class that'll go along with you, you can take that position. Now, when it comes to Zionism, good luck finding that faction.
Yeah. As I said, Zelensky is learning what it means to be a side piece. Israel is America's true love, and they're not going to be, they're going to be completely loyal to it. And that's true. The entire American bipartisan ruling class and political elite are Zionists to the core, and they say it and they mean it. And so that's a problem. But as you say, Kennedy can claim to be against war and trying to prevent nuclear war, but the first place where nuclear weapons are likely to be used is in the Israeli-Iran conflict. Israel will use nuclear weapons against Iran because they have them, because they want to set Iran back at least 10 or 20 years. And the only thing they think, they know Iran is dangerous. It's getting more dangerous. Every year that goes by, Iran is getting relatively stronger in relation to Israel, and the Palestinian resistance, therefore, is getting stronger. So Israel needs to, Iran is a powerful country. They know what weapon do they have that could set Iran back 10 or 20 years and get them off the table the way they got Iraq and Syria off the table and Libya off the table. Nothing but nuclear weapons. They will use every weapon at their disposal, and nuclear weapons will be one of them. And the way it will work out is they'll promise the Americans they won't. You come along with us. We won't use nuclear weapons, and they'll just use them. And the Americans, what are they going to do? They're going to go along with it because they have to. So this is extremely dangerous. And if Bobby Kennedy doesn't see it, that's a problem. That's his problem, and it's something, one of the things that crosses him off a list.
One of the things I thought we're coming towards the end, but I'm going to throw this at you. Go put on my tinfoil hat, right? And that usually means you're pretty close to the truth. Okay. In the event that Israel does something absurd, Iran blows up the oil infrastructure, the Western economy collapses. Okay. But I've often felt this. The ruling elite are looking at it and they're saying, our economy is on the verge of collapse. And we can't pay our debts, our corporate debts. All of our corporations are, basically hollowed out zombie company. This thing is a disaster that's waiting to fall at any minute. Maybe if we just do something to destroy the economy and do a complete reset, it fixes all this stuff. You know what I mean? If like everything's in such bad shape, they know it's in a shambles, they know it's ready to fall apart. And so in the back of their minds, they're thinking if something happens that would destroy the Western and world economy, in a way, it would get us out of a jam. Because if it just collapses of its own weight, people are going to say all these decisions the ruling elite made got us to back to 1929 or worse. But if it happens as a result of the Middle East or a war in China, then we can say, well, it wasn't our decisions. I don't know. Your thoughts on that, Steve, before we get out of here.
They've been the WEF and various Western and world militaries have been gaming something that they refer to as cyber polygon for a handful of years now. And that is effectively like a complete and total grid collapse. It's, it hacks of all of the electrical systems, all the financial systems, all of these things. Once the juice gets turned back on, as it were, you've got, we've been doing all of these stories lately about many nuclear reactors that are going to be the backbone, the energy backbone for powering data centers. They're going to be the energy backbone for powering towns and things like that. And so if you're worried about getting away from a grip on Iranian oil, well, hey, look, America's billionaires have invested a ton of money into, many nuclear reactor infrastructure. And that seems to be the pathway that they're trying to get this to go. You can also introduce the central bank backed digital currency, but they've already said for the West, it's not going to be a, central bank issued token. You're going to have corporate tokens and individual bank issued tokens that are all going to be processed on the back end as one central bank digital currency. And so if you were trying to orchestrate something like that, they're definitely making all of the moves in order to set up that reset and that bait and switch.
Well, that guy, it makes sense to me.
No,
Let me see if anything else. I think that's about it. Did you have a last comment there?
yeah, I was going to
Jim?
say, in relation to what you said, Garland, this is a Marxist analysis. Capitalism war is beneficial to capitalism once in a while because it destroys a lot of productive capacity. It does reset the economy. It gives a field for investment in things that have to be replaced. Whole society-wide productive capacity is destroyed. It has to be done on a big scale, and then you have investments that become more profitable because the profit is for Marxism in an inverse relationship to productivity in a certain sense, and they need to get rid of productive capacity and productive elements to reinvest in labor-intensive and whole society. And it's a kind of simulacrum of socialism where you can plan how to change. You have to plan for the whole society, and you have to do things in a coordinated way. So it's some sense, from a Marxist point of view, it's always been the suspicion and that capitalism likes war once in a while as precisely a means of economic reset.
Well, we all recall.
Just to make the Depression didn't end because of Roosevelt's domestic policy. It ended because of World War II.
And here's the thing: we all recall the infamous dam that they built in what was it in Afghanistan that they blew up like 3 times. Build it, blow it up, build it, blow it up, build it, blow it up. And now we see BlackRock and JP Morgan. What do they say? It would cost almost $500 billion to reconstruct Ukraine. So what do? We make all of this money. Sending weapons. Oh, they've got to get more weapons. Zelensky had one job. What is Zelensky, no matter what has his job always been? asking for more weapons. Need more weapons, need more weapons. They got blown up. Great. Can you give us more? Well, they got blown up. Exactly. Can we get more? Blow up, blow up, blow up, blow up, blow up, right? And now they're like, yeah, this thing looks like it's coming to an end. Okay, what do you think we can do? Well, we blew everything up with weapons. $500 billion will fix that. And by the way, BlackRock's going to buy all the now. By the way, JP Morgan, I saw something else where they had a deal now. They're buying homes there, just like they are here, to rent out. So it's the same, exactly what you said. You make money blowing it up,
and then you make money rebuilding
and
it.
then you make money building it up. Last word, Steve Poikonen.
That's absolutely the game plan. There's also the possibility that Israel's Greater Israel Project experiment doesn't necessarily go the way they want it to. They meet more resistance with Iran. Syria becomes activated, and Hezbollah continues, taking out troops on the IOF troops on the ground. The potential to relocate to a now hollowed out Ukraine becomes very, very, very much greater. And Odessa is nicknamed Gateway to Zion, and 5 Israeli prime ministers have been Ukrainian nationality to begin with. So there's a lot of overlap to both of these conflicts that I don't think a lot of people have examined closely. And depending on outcome, we could see a very rapid reshifting of individual nation state lines and populations. The whole Ukraine project has been designed for 15-minute cities in the rebuild from day one. So it's going to be very interesting.
Well, here's the other thing I got to say before we go. The Middle East for the last ever since the end of say the end of the Soviet Union, 91. What's one of the first things they started doing? That Soviet Union ended in 91. What year did they attack Iraq again? 91, right? So the Middle East was the conflict zone. That's the area that they blew stuff up and they rebuilt. So that was a conflict zone, and they made a hell of a lot of money in that conflict zone, right? But it appears to me that Ukraine is about turning the Europe into a similar conflict zone. And now you got the Ukrainian Nazis, you got vanilla ISIS, as they call them, right? So they're already set in the region, so they can do terrorism and blow things up. They're armed to the teeth, because like in the same way that you armed bin Laden and his people to the teeth and set them loose in the region, right? So to me, these poor schmucks in Europe that are like waving, some of them waking up, waving Ukrainian flags out their window. Yeah, we got to support Ukraine. They're turning Europe into the same kind of damn conflict zone that they had in the Middle East. Jim.
Yeah. I mean, Europeans have been devastated by this. And it is a project, as I said, since the demise of the Soviet Union, they've given up on social democracy and they went after the social democratic structures, and massive migration was part of that. And they went after, the whole process of social democracy, because they brought back neoliberal capitalism. And now with the sanctions against Russia that turn out and blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline and destroying the possibility of any kind of mutually beneficial economic relationship between Europe and Russia, especially between Germany and Russia, the European economies are in decline and Russia's economy is going up, and they have to try and do something to fight against that. And the thing that the Americans have in their quiver to fight against that is to blow shit up, namely Europe, if it has to be.
All right. Well, that's enough. Certainly appreciate you guys. We took a little extra time, but we had a lot of important. Steve, where can people find you?
amwakeupshow.com, and everything else is there on all of the channels. We're putting out content multiple times a day, 7 days a week. There's a bunch of other great shows you can catch on the Rockfin and Rumble. We're also on Odyssey and BitChute for people who want to move away from the aforementioned platforms. And thank you, Garland. Good to catch up with you again, Jim. It's a shame that we're not doing this on the radio anymore, but that's because the Department of Justice is a very, very disgusting piece of the machine.
Yeah,
Jim.
Yeah, well, you can find me on my Substack. That's the main place to go. I'll put everything up on there, and a Twitter @thepolemicist_. And yeah, it's been great to be here, and hope we can do this regularly. It was I missed the Sputnik, and it's too bad that we got crushed on that. But Now people can see us, how pretty we are.
There we go. Everybody share this on all your social media platforms. Follow me on Rockfin and Rumble, because there is no idea how the BitChute, because we have no idea how long before. I mean, to be quite frank, this thing is so shadow banned. I'm lucky I got one person. It's unbelievable how much they've shadow banned. I had just had somebody email me the other day and say, yeah, I've been unsubscribed for like the 5th time. And I go search for your channel. It's impossible for me to find your channel. So, I'm doing the best I can. So, the game. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Everybody, if you can afford to donate, we got Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, PayPal, all that kind of stuff. Thanks a lot. We're out.